Okay, good evening and welcome to the A Thousand Shimmering Lights live stream. We are back. Took a bit of a hiatus for the holidays, and then last month I was gonna do a live stream, and then right before I was supposed to start, I realized that I had reinstalled my operating system since the last one, and I hadn't reinstalled OBS, and I couldn't stream. But we got all the kinks worked out, so we are here tonight doing a live stream. This is the first one in my new apartment, so if everything behind me looks a little bit different, it's because I'm in my new place. That's my board game shelf, where I keep all of my board games. In case you're curious, what's right behind me there? Probably should get a green screen at some point, but actually, I have a few astronomy themed board games. That might be a fun topic for an episode. But tonight, we are doing the dumb questions special episode. That dumb is in quotes because I often say on this channel there is no such thing as a dumb question. I genuinely believe that. And what I mean by that is that any question honestly asked. So you don't know something and you want to know, it's always a good question, right? Um, so, you know, gotcha questions and like conspiratorial nonsense that's just meant to whatever that may be a different topic. But if you generally genuinely want to learn something and you ask a question, it's never a dumb question. That's always been my belief. And so tonight we're going to talk about some of my favorite dumb questions I've been asked. Questions where people have said, "Hey, yeah, this feels like kind of a dumb question, but," and then it's turned out to be a really cool question or have a really interesting answer, right? A lot of times those kinds of questions are the coolest ones, the most interesting ones to really dive into. I'm going to take a look real fast and see if we have anybody watching the stream right now. Because no, we got a couple people. Cool, cool. All right. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. Usually, at the beginning of every episode, I mention how I'm the membership director for Nephis. But as of this month, I am no longer the membership director for Nephis. I actually stepped down. Of course, it was never meant to be a permanent position. It's a volunteer position. It's a nonprofit organization and a local club. So I recently stepped down after serving as membership director for 3 or 4 years, I think. It was an honor and a privilege to serve in that capacity, but it's time for me to move on and for somebody else to take over for a bit. And so we do have a new membership director. Her name is Pearl, and she's fantastic. And I handed over the reins and showed her all the things I was doing. And I'm excited to see what direction she takes things as she figures out her own organization and that kind of deal. But on that topic, I am still affiliated with Nephis, which is to say that is the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society. I'm still a member. I still do a lot of our outreach and stuff. Still going to be very active, just not as a membership director. And I still want to start and end every episode by encouraging you guys to check it out. If you live in the Jacksonville area or the greater Jacksonville area and you are at all interested in astronomy, check out our website, check out our calendar for our events, which I'll go over here in a second. If you are an amateur astronomer, you're looking to get into the hobby, you got a telescope, you want to learn more about how to use it, absolutely check us out and consider joining the club. Joining an astronomy club is the best way to get good at astronomy. Hands down, no substitute. I have become such a better observer since joining this club than I ever was messing around with a telescope on my own. I tell people all the time, astronomy is a team sport, right? So join our team, which you can do by going to membership and hitting join Nephis. We can do new memberships or renewals, right? Fill out the form. Got the membership types right here. Students and seniors. So students, anybody with a student ID, you're in high school, you're in college, you're a student. Senior is anyone over 55. That's only $20. These are yearly, by the way. This is not the monthly rate. This is what you pay for a whole year of membership in Nephis. $20 if you're a student or a senior. If not, you're just some guy, you're an individual, $40. $40, 1 year membership in Nephis. Family membership is $50. That's we call a family any two adults and whoever they happen to be in charge of. We don't get specific about it. Everyone can be a part of our family, and we love all families. But it's just any two adults and whoever they happen to be in charge of taking care of. That's a family to us. And that's $50. And then benefactor, you don't get anything different for being a benefactor other than you're mentioned in our newsletters. Sometimes if we do like door prizes, you might get 2 raffle tickets instead of 1. But mainly, this is just a level for people who feel like they want to give more, right? It just is an opportunity for people to give more to the club. And we used to have the corporate one though, where you get like advertisements in our newsletter. I don't see it on the list, and I want to say we're working on figuring that one out. But these are what we got here, and of course you can fill this out and you can join. You can pay through PayPal. It's probably the easiest, most convenient way to do it. Checking my analytics again to see if I have anybody. It says I've got 3 people watching, or maybe 3 views. That could all just be me. I don't think I have anyone watching right now. But if anybody is here, or you're watching this later after the fact, well, actually, no. What I'm about to say doesn't apply to that. If you are watching now live, definitely say hi in the chat so I know that you're here. I always like getting a lot of interaction with the audience. I like to see you guys typing in the chat. I like to know you're here and I'm not just talking at a blank wall right here in my apartment. I like to get that feedback. I like to get that interaction and know I'm not just, talking nonsense. But this is Nefus. You should definitely check us out. And now for anybody who is watching this later or might be watching now, let's go over the calendar real fast. We're going to go over some of the events between now and the next one. And actually, I'm going to go back a week. Last Friday, Stargazing and S'mores, that has been canceled due to weather. It's been rescheduled for March 10th. That's not a public event. That one is an event for the Friends of Little Talbot Island. But I am looking forward to it. So if you are a club member and you're watching this and you want to volunteer, check it out. It's a great event. You make s'mores and it's really cool. You hang out. They got a great sky out there. Not open to the general public, unfortunately. But any club members watching this who want to volunteer, just so you guys are aware of that, that's been moved to March. This is today, obviously. This weekend, 5 p.m., Hannah Park. This is going to be our monthly Hannah Park observing session. I have not been able to make the last 3 or 4 Hannah Park sessions, and I hate it because I love doing Hannah Park, and it's just something has always come up. We've scheduled 2 things on the same night, and I couldn't be at both of them, or one time I was sick. There's always been some reason, but I definitely plan on being there this Saturday night with my laser. Doing a short version of what you're going to see tonight, but with an actual beam pointed at the sky. It's a wonderful, wonderful time. This is our big public outreach. Sorry, I'm off by a week. That Saturday night is the Dark Sky site. I'll try and go to that too, though. But next Saturday night is Hannah Park. Correction on that. So Hannah Park Stargaze next Saturday night. 5 p.m. We want to be in there by then, and we're going to do it. We always try to shoot for closest to first quarter moon. And these Hannah Park sessions, they can be a lot of fun. We, this is our public outreach, like I mentioned. We set up a whole bunch of telescopes. The whole lot 8 in Hannah Park fills with telescopes, and they're not there for us. They are there for you. They're there for people to come up and say, hey, what are we looking at? Look through the scope. Talk about what you're seeing. We're going to look at the planets. We're going to look at the moon. I think we're going to try and get that comet. I'm not sure if it's going to still be good by then, but might as well go for it, right? The comet that you've been hearing so much about that we may talk about a bit tonight. And I meant to research why it's green, and I didn't. Son of a gun. But we're going to look at that stuff. Galaxies, nebulae, star clusters, all that kind of good stuff, weather permitting. I will say that Hannah Park is a non-weather dependent event. The policy is Nefus never cancels. So if we say we're going to be there, we will be there. We have had sessions where we hang out under the gazebo looking things they got out there. Those where the picnic tables are, pouring rain. And we're just hanging out under there talking about space with whoever wants to hang out and talk about space. There's always at least a couple of us that show up regardless of the weather. That's just us keeping our obligation to you guys, making sure that we're always there. And it's cool. We get bad weather, we're going to hang out and talk about space. We're going to make it happen some kind of way. Also, I recommend if you've got a new telescope and you're learning how to use it, get there a little early. While we're waiting for it to get dark is a great time to meet club members and say, hey, I brought a scope because I don't really know how to use it, right? You can bring your own telescope to Hanna Park. You don't just have to use ours. And it's a great way to learn, and we do a lot of telescope doctoring for people or telescope clinic before the event really starts. That's mainly it for the rest of February. Getting into March, we got our general meeting on the very first Friday there, Friday the 3rd. There's also the Jacksonville Science Festival, which is a big 2-day event. We're going to have volunteers there. This is a daytime event, so we're going to have volunteers there with solar telescopes specifically designed. And I do want to say, because I'm on the internet right now, never, ever point your telescope at the sun, but we are going to have special filters and safety precautions in place, and we know what we're doing to safely point our telescope at the sun to observe the sun safely. But if you just have a telescope at home and you don't know about solar filtration, you don't know about proper solar observing, definitely do a lot of research on it and get proper equipment before you do anything. The general rule is do not ever point your telescope at the sun. But we are going to be observing the sun at the Jacksonville Science Festival, so definitely come by and say hi if you're going to be going to that. Or if you're a member of the club with solar equipment and you want to volunteer, we could use a few people to volunteer, and not just people with scopes. We need people to also watch the solar telescopes, while those of us who own them maybe need to step away for a bit and use the bathroom or see some of the booths because we want to enjoy it or whatever. It helps to have more people there than telescopes, right? So it's okay to have some extra people. That gives us more flexibility. And so that's going to be going on. Our general meeting is going to be that Friday. I'm actually going to be presenting. So you see right there, there's my name. I'm going to be talking about something called the Messier Marathon. That's another topic we could talk about tonight if you guys are interested in it. But basically, the short version is... oh, Susie, what's up? I see you there in the chat. The short version is the Messier Marathon. There's 110 objects called the Messier List. They're all the biggest and brightest deep sky stuff, so the galaxies, nebulae, star clusters. And there's an opportunity in March every year that if you start observing right as the sun goes down and you don't stop until the sun comes up the next day, you can observe all 110 of them in a single night. And that's called doing a Messier Marathon. So I'm going to be giving a whole talk about how that works and what that's about, what that's like, and what we do to do a Messier Marathon. By the way, real fast, I do want to quickly just say, since we do have at least one person watching, I did mention I had to reinstall OBS and set it all back up again. Let me know if there's anything goofy about the stream. I may need to tweak the settings. So audio quality, video quality, feel free to let me know about it, because I basically had to start over with OBS. All right. And then I'm just going to quickly mention Stargazing and S'mores, of course, got moved. And then that brings us to Third Thursday again. And so that pretty much catches us up on the calendar immediately after... immediately after Third Thursday is going to be, which will be my next live stream, will be the 16th. We're going to have our Star Party that weekend. This is club members only Star Party. Again, sorry if you're watching this and you're not a club member. This is a trial run that we're doing with Goldhead State Park as a proof of concept before doing more Star Parties later. And so right now we're limiting it just to club members. If you want more information about that, you can check with any of the board members, basically. You can go to NEFAS BOD and check out our board, maybe message our president, Mike Napper, for more information about that. So that is our calendar for NEFAS. I also want to quickly shout out that if you live in the St. Augustine area, you may consider our friends down there, the Ancient City Astronomy Club. They're another fantastic group of guys who do astronomy and again, get in with an astronomy club. And if you're watching this show from somewhere other than Jacksonville and your eyes have just glazed over the whole time I've been talking about our club, get involved with whatever club where you live. Like Google your city astronomy clubs or astronomical society. A lot of places call themselves astronomical societies, and find out who's out there, because getting involved with the local astronomy club is awesome. And I think everyone should do it, especially if you want to get into the hobby of astronomy and you want to get better at it. Joining a club is the way to go. It's the way to learn this hobby. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move into the actual show now. So I've got Stellarium pulled up, As always, I use Stellarium Web as my planetarium software to allow me to do a virtual sort of planetarium for you guys. This is Stellarium Web because for some reason OBS doesn't like the downloaded version. Because you can download Stellarium to your computer. Both versions are free. I like the downloaded one a little bit better, honestly, but OBS seems to like this one better for streaming, so that's why I use the web version. But they're both excellent. Made by and for astronomers, so all the deep sky objects are in there. You can do a search feature, the whole bit. I can travel in time and space. I can go different places on the Earth and see their skies. So we can talk about any time, any place, observing from the Earth, of course. I won't be able to show you what it looks like from Alpha Centauri, but I'm not sponsored by Stellarium or anything. I just like shouting them out every time I do the show because I use it so much. And just so you guys know how it works, like I said, I can sort of pan this thing around. The objects in the software, the brightness of the object is related to the size of that dot, right? The only exceptions to this in Stellarium are the sun and moon, which are shown in their real size in the sky, how big they would appear to be. All other objects, their size in the software is a demonstration of their brightness. So when you're looking at stars, these bigger dots represent brighter stars, and these, hey, look, a satellite. And these smaller dots represent fainter stars, right? So you get the brightness by the size of the dot, which means that Venus is outrageously bright. Outrageously bright. In case you've ever wondered, Venus is so bright. But getting into the software, let's go ahead and do a very quick tour of what's in the sky tonight. And then we'll start to dive into some of the premise of tonight's episode, which are the supposedly dumb questions, which, again, I say there is no such thing. And I want to remind everybody that the chat is wide open to hop in there and start asking questions. You don't have to wait for me to get to a stopping point. I'll see your question, and when I can, I'll address it. I might pin it, but just jump right on in there, and that's what I love. I love the chat to be lively and interactive and asking questions. That drives the show. So let's talk about what's in the sky tonight. So this is the sky tonight here in Jacksonville. Starting off, looking north, we, of course, have our circumpolar constellations. Ursa Major is going to be coming up in the east, east of the North Pole, I should say. It's going to be in the northern sky, kind of coming up on the eastern side of the pole star. So rising as the night continues. As you can see, these are all big old dots. These are very bright stars. So if you live in an urban area, this will not be a difficult one to spot. Even from, I've shown this to people from just like downtown Jacksonville, right? There's no trouble spotting. The Big Dipper, as it's famously known, or the Plough to our friends in the UK, or as we astronomers refer to it, Ursa Major, which Ursa Major is actually more than just the Dipper. As you can see, there are additional stars involved in forming Ursa Major, the Big Bear. Now, if you find Ursa Major, you can take the edge of the bowl of the Dipper and draw upwards, like up out of like the open part of the Dipper. Draw a line through those two stars, and you will hit this star right here. It's going to be brighter than anything near it, but it's not going to be super bright. And this is Polaris. And this actually would even, I think, get into our topic tonight of supposedly dumb questions. I've had people ask, what's the brightest star? And feel like embarrassed, like, it's Polaris, right? That's dumb. That's a dumb question. But no, actually, you're right to ask, because it's not Polaris. Polaris is not the brightest star. It is the 43rd brightest star, right? It's just the most famous star. Everyone knows the North Star, and so people just assume it must be the brightest one because it's the one everyone's heard of. But in fact, it's actually not even in the top 25. It's barely in the top 50. We'll talk about the brightest star because that one is in the sky as well. Once you found Polaris, you found the Little Dipper, but you'll notice these are all fairly small dots. The Little Dipper is not very easy to spot. What you'll usually see is Polaris, and then you'll see these two stars right here, and that's the edge of the bowl, and then you kind of have to look carefully to fill in the rest of the Dipper stars. And in fact, one test of your sky transparency, how dark and clear is the sky, is how many of the stars in Ursa Minor can you pick out, right? How many Little Dipper stars can you get? You see 3 of them, that's bad, right? If you see more than that, it's good. If you see all 7, that's great, right? Um, Not a perfect test because I've definitely been able to make out all 7 stars from okay skies, but if you don't see all 7, that's not great. Um, but we call these circumpolar constellations because they are near the pole star. And so any time of year, you're going to have access to most of these constellations. They just sort of go around the pole star. Um, on the opposite side of the pole star, we have Cassiopeia. And Cassiopeia is one of my favorite constellations. It's this big M shape here. If I add the lines, you see this sort of big M, or, at other parts of the year, it's more like a W. It's sort of landing on its side, open for interpretation. Um, Cassiopeia is the Queen of Ethiopia from the Perseus story. And one cool thing about Cassiopeia, again, fairly bright stars. It's a really good one to learn under light polluted skies. And if you see, the one leg of the M is stretched out and one is nice and tall. The one that's nice and tall, you go through it like it's an arrow through a bow, and you will hit this reddish star here called Merak. Why are some stars red? Also kind of gets into some of the topics we might be talking about tonight. Once you find Merak, you hop over 1 and 2 stars, and then you hit this, which is the Andromeda Galaxy. If you get somewhere dark enough, you can see the Andromeda Galaxy with the unaided eye. You can just look up and go, there it is, right? So Cassiopeia is the best way to find the Andromeda Galaxy, because Andromeda itself can sometimes be a bit tricky, but Cass will always point right at it. Let me just check the chat and see. Didn't wonder at all why the comment was green until I brought it up. Yeah, okay, right. We'll definitely touch on the green comet in a little bit. But yeah, I do need to research why some comets are green, because I meant to and I totally forgot. If you find Andromeda, this is next to Pegasus. You'll see here Pegasus. We're losing Pegasus early right now, right? So as we move past winter and into spring, Pegasus is going to set earlier and earlier every night. We're going to kind of lose Pegasus. It's a bit more of a wintry kind of constellation. Andromeda, of course, is connected right to Pegasus. Perseus is nearby to Cassiopeia. If I take away the lines, you can kind of make out a sort of fork in the road shape, right? You got the stars down here, and it sort of goes one way and the other. That's Perseus. It's always right by Cassiopeia. And about halfway between those two is where the double cluster lives, which is a great amateur telescope target it's honestly a good binocular target. It is not a difficult target at all. You just sort of go about halfway, I'd say a little closer to Perseus than you are to Cass, and you'll get it. And it's just 2 rich star clusters next to each other, almost overlapping. It's very beautiful. Just so many stars in the field. If we go to the eastern sky, we can talk about some of the things that are going to be rising as the night continues. And right out of the gate, we see early in the night, Leo is coming up. So Regulus here is the big bright star in Leo. And we can find this sort of square shape here, or this sort of rectangle shape here. And at the back end, we have this sort of triangle here to Denebola. But the big giveaway that we're dealing with Leo is this sort of curve of stars going on right here. Sort of looks like a backwards question mark. That's the mane of the lion. That's the lion's mane. If I put the lines in, you can kind of see where the body is, the tail, and the mane of the lion. Just as part, astronomers like to refer to that as the sickle of Leo. So Leo is coming up, which is exciting. Because it means we're starting to move in towards galaxy season, right? In another couple of months, we're going to be in galaxy territory, because right after Leo comes Virgo, and that whole part of space between Leo and Virgo is absolutely silly with galaxies. And within Leo, there's a lot of galaxies within Leo as well. In fact, a good favorite of mine is you take this star and this one right here, these ones sort of back near the back end, and round about halfway through, you get halfway between the two of them, you get this trio of galaxies. We call it the Leo triplet. These two are fairly bright. This one's going to be a bit more of a challenge in an amateur scope, but all well within the range of even smallish amateur scopes. I would say anything 60 millimeters or more, it's not going to be too difficult. And a 60 millimeter may be a bit of a challenge, but you get somewhere decently dark, you can usually make out all 3. excellent target. And you see, here's another galaxy, right? Just hanging out. Just anywhere I go in here, we're just going to be hitting galaxies. Zoom in a little bit. There's one, right? Oh, there's another galaxy right there. So, galaxy season coming up. But looking above Leo, let's get to over here, sort of southeast, I would say, more so south if I zoom out like this, but definitely high in the sky from what we can see here. And we have Orion, right? And if we delete the lines, we can still see how easy Orion is to spot. The belt, of course, very famous. I often ask people just for fun. I'm always curious and say, "Can you name any constellations? Do you know any constellations?" And the most common answer I get to that is Orion's belt. People say, I know Orion's belt. Orion's belt isn't a constellation. It's part of a constellation. There's more to Orion. He doesn't just have a belt. But the 3 belt stars are the easiest to find. We've got Betelgeuse, a very famous red star forming the shoulder. And as you can see from the size of the dot, a very bright one. Bellatrix, his other shoulder. Saiph and Rigel, his 2 knees. If we add in the artwork, you can see we've also got different artwork depicts it differently. If I add the art, it's a lion skin in a lot of art, but I feel like this sort of conflates this guy with Hercules, right? Because Hercules slew the Nemean lion. I've never accepted the narrative that this is a lion skin. To me, this is clearly a bow, and he's reaching back to his quiver for some arrows, right? That's how I've always interpreted Orion, and I will die on that hill. But other people insist that this is a club and a lion skin, and I just don't buy it, right? But that's my own personal opinion on Orion. But the cool thing about Orion is if we find Orion, just check the chat real fast. If we find Orion, we can easily use it to find several other constellations. So from Orion coming down and to the left, we will hit the actual brightest star in the sky. So not Polaris, but Sirius. Sirius is the brightest star. And this is Canis Major. So we have Sirius, go back to Wezn, right? Sirius to Mirzum is the front paw. Sirius back to Wezn is the body. Wezn to Adara is the rear leg and paw. Wezn to Aludra is the tail. And then coming off of Sirius, these are, as you can see, very faint stars. You have to get somewhere dark, but there is a head over here as well. If I add in the lines, you can kind of make out the shape of the dog here. That's Canis Major. Not only does Canis Major have the brightest star in the whole sky, it's got a couple of other really cool sights. If you draw this sort of, I don't know, weird boxy thing, and you go about a third of the way down, sort of in the middle-ish, we've got Messier 41. That's a great one. Off to the side here, we've got the Tau Canis Majoris cluster, which is a phenomenal star cluster. Really cool looking. Most star clusters are like, oh, it looks like a bunch of stars, whatever. This one has one really bright star in the middle, and then a bunch of little stars around it, like almost in the glow of that star. It's really cool looking. I don't know, I can't think of another cluster that looks quite like it. I really, really like that cluster. Also from Orion, we find Sirius. We see another bright star over here and a dimmer one. These 2 stars, Procyon and Gomesa, form Canis Minor. Canis Minor is literally just those 2 stars. That's the little dog. Nearby, we also can find Pollux and Castor. These are 2 very bright stars. You'll see them together in the sky. These are the 2 bright stars that are the heads of the 2 Gemini twins. If I add the lines, you can kind of see where the rest of the twins are. Their heads and their feet are the brightest stars in the constellations, and the one in the middle, the stars in the middle are sort of kind of there. Generally, when I'm looking in the sky at Gemini, I usually see the 2 bright ones, the feet, and then just sort of a vague rectangle of stars. That's pretty much where you are with it. But that's Gemini. A really cool, off the tip of Gemini's foot here is M35. That's an excellent star cluster, another open star cluster. This region of the sky is good for open clusters. If you really like open clusters, and man, who doesn't? This is a fantastic piece of sky for you here. As we move over from that, we have the next bright star over here, which is Capella. And then you'll see this sort of loop of bright stars, which includes Capella, these 3 stars, Hasala, Elnath, Theta Aurigae, and Minkalanon. Doing my best on these names. This is Auriga the Charioteer. moving over from Capella, and you can see how the rotation's getting weird because I'm looking straight up right now. So tonight, this is going to be straight above your head about now-ish, right? Later in the night, it's going to move. Getting all weird. Nearby, we'll find this bright red star here named Aldebaran, and you'll see this V shape. That's the face of Taurus the Bull. And if we extend out that V, we hit Elnath and Zeta Tauri. Those are the tips of the horns of the bull. And then the Pleiades, I always like to joke, the Pleiades is his butt. That's his backside. And then we can kind of come back around and we find Rigel. So those bright stars I was showing you, they form a pattern we call the winter hexagon. So if I zoom out, we have Sirius, Procyon, Castor and Pollux, Capella, Aldebaran, Rigel. That's the winter hexagon. So if you learn to find those stars, those 7 stars that form the 6 points of the hexagon, Castor and Pollux, of course, 2 stars, you will have found 6 different constellations. So that's a really good place to start learning how to find winter constellations. They're all, as you can see, these are all fairly bright stars, not difficult to find at all, and a good place to start. Check in the chat again. I want to remind anybody who's watching, let me check my analytics and see. We have a couple of people, it looks like. Oh, looks like now it's starting to jump up. We got some people. Cool. If you're just joining us, definitely say hi in the chat. Let me know that you're here. Don't be shy at all. I love knowing that people are here, right? And I love people asking questions drives the show. So definitely get in on those questions and don't be scared. So that's some of the stuff we can see in the sky. I do want to point out we've got some planets going on right now, which is always cool when we have some planets. So if you look sort of vaguely southeast, and we go up, we find that reddish star Aldebaran that I mentioned that's going to be in this winter hexagon. You will see another nearby red star. That is not a star. That is Mars. Mars is reddish in appearance and will look red to the eye. It's no longer near its perihelion, it's no longer near its opposition point. We've long since passed Mars, so it's not going to be super big and huge and impressive in the view, but always worth a look. It'll definitely look like a little red dot in the view. It'll be really cool. You want to check out Mars. This is also getting close to where that comet is. Let me see if I can find it if I zoom in. I don't remember where the heck the comet is right now, though. If anyone knows the comet's current location, drop it in the chat. Is this the comet? No. Drop it in the chat, and I will try to find it here in Stellarium, and we can talk about the comet if you guys want to talk about the comet. But that's Mars. Let me zoom out a little bit. The other planets, I'm going to be honest, we're going to lose them kind of early tonight, and we're going to lose them earlier and earlier in the following nights. Venus is already below the horizon as we spoke. But tomorrow night, as the sun is going down and things are dimming, you will see the very first star to come out. The sun goes down. This star will be sort of following it down. Outrageously, very, very, very bright. Way brighter than any star has any business being. That is Venus. And then if you go up above Venus, Jupiter is there. We're going to be losing Jupiter earlier and earlier as the year goes on. As you can see, it's here in the west. Anything you see here in the west is going away as the months continue. Because everything rises in the east and sets in the west. So if you haven't been getting out with your telescope, observe Jupiter while you still have a chance before it goes away, and we have to wait till next year to catch back up with it again. Jupiter, always a fantastic sight. If you've not seen Jupiter through a telescope, honestly, tomorrow night, because by the time this stream is over with, it'll be set. But tomorrow night, get out and look at it. Definitely, highly recommend observing Jupiter. And then Uranus is tough, honestly. There's a reason it wasn't discovered for a while. But in terms of bright planets, Venus is set. Jupiter's kind of following it. We've got Mars as well. Let me see, what are some other constellations worth bringing up tonight? I feel like I covered the major ones that are in the sky. Aries, of course, is over here as well. Triangulum. But in terms of like a beginner's crash course and what stars to go out and look for tonight, if you're still new to it, I think we've kind of covered those. So I'm going to take a break from the Sky Tour real fast to double check the chat and see if we have any more conversation. Ryan is here. What's up, Ryan? Welcome tonight. I'm going to reiterate tonight's premise for anyone who just joined us. So tonight's premise is, this is the dumb question, giant air quotes around that, dumb question special episode. The theme of tonight's episode is what I always say, and I'm going to say it tonight because it's the theme, but also because I say it every time I stream. Ask your dumb question. There is no such thing as a dumb question. I genuinely believe that. I believe that if you want to know something and you don't know, and you ask a question because you want to know, it's always a good question. It's never a dumb question. It's always good to be curious and to learn and to have the courage to risk looking silly asking those questions, because everything you don't know, that's an opportunity to learn, right? I often say the man who does not, or the man who knows everything is incapable of learning, right? That's a phrase I like to say because you've met these people, right? Everyone's met somebody who knows everything, right? There's just never something they don't know. Whatever you're talking about, they're going to be the expert. They're going to jump in on it and act like they know and make an idiot of themselves, right? They know everything. That person can't learn, right? Learning is the act of being wrong about things and then learning, right? Not knowing and then knowing. So definitely always have the courage to just jump in there with any kind of question and ask, and don't worry about how it's going to look. And so to drive that point home tonight, I made a list. I tried to remember, because it's a mental list I had. I tried to remember some of the dumb questions people have asked me and have really interesting answers. So we're going to get into those questions to show that you don't have to be scared to ask whatever your question is. But hopefully before the stream is over tonight, I will have answered several audience questions as well, right? So this is the ultimate judgment-free astronomy learning zone. We are all here to learn, and you will not get any grief out of me for asking any kind of dumb question. And if anyone gives you grief in the chat, they're getting booted, right? This is not the place for that. So let's kick it off. Let me grab my list real fast. I had a list. Sunspots are the next thing. What kind of setup would I need with a Dob to see them? Tell you what, since you asked me a question, we're going to start with your question, man. And not that I'm implying it's a dumb question. It's actually a fantastic question. So what do you need with a Dob to observe sunspots? So I'm going to bring up my Wikimedia thing that I always use so that I've got royalty-free images. Actually, I think I can get away with this because this is a product kind of thing. So we're going to do solar filter for Dobsonian 8-inch, sure. You want to look up the size of your telescope, and then what you want is a full aperture solar filter like these, right? What you don't want is there used to be telescopes that would come with like this little thing that you put on the eyepiece, and they're like, that's a solar filter. No, that's a way to go to the hospital is what that is. That is not a solar filter. A proper solar filter should cap over the end of your telescope and completely obstruct the aperture of your telescope. And that's it. That's honestly all you need. It's not a super complex setup. I was really driving home earlier about, like, don't point your telescope at the sun unless you got the right equipment, just because I don't want to be responsible for anyone's safety. But it's not difficult, and they're not super expensive. This is a good example. Personally, I like the glass ones. The Botter film does work, and a lot of people swear by the Botter film, so that it's not like just because you see wrinkles in it doesn't mean this is poor quality. A lot of people swear by the Botter film, and it costs almost as much. In either case, what you want to do before you put it on the telescope, take it up above your head like this and look through it, not directly at the sun, but look through it for any hot spots. See if you see any bright bits of light. If you do, take a Sharpie and make sure that you get no holes in the filtration, basically. But any well-manufactured modern one probably isn't going to have one. I've had my solar filter for years. I've never had to do the Sharpie thing, but always want to double check. So always want to be safe. And you want to cap that over the end of your telescope. And they have these little securing screws on them. And something I tend to do is I'll take like red tape, and I'll red tape the filter onto the telescope. Not because I think this tape is like super mega strong and to hold it, but almost like a safety, like break the seal kind of thing, where like seeing the tape is a reminder that this is on, right? If the tape is not on, it has not been like this. Especially I do this when we have like when I go and do public events where I show off to other people. I'll tape the scope, and basically it's like a visual indication like this is past the safety inspection and is people can look through it. I kind of do that now as like a way to let other people feel more at ease around my telescope. But I put it on, I tape it on, and obviously don't be anywhere near the eyepiece when you remove it. And that's pretty much what you need. And then to get the sun, there's a really cool trick you can do. Longer focal length refractor. What are good targets this time of year? What should I shoot? Cool. We'll cover you next, because that's another great question. Planets, for one thing. Definitely would say planets. What's your aperture? If you don't mind putting your aperture in there in addition to your focal length. So that's the way to do the solar observing. And then to get the sun lined up, you don't want to look down the tube. That's the great way to lose your retinas. What you actually do is you look down at the shadow of your telescope on the ground. And as you move the tube, you're watching the shadow, and you're trying to turn the shadow of the tube into a circle. Right? If the shadow is elongated, that means the sun's hitting at an angle. But if it's pointed directly at the sun, it should cast a circular shadow on the ground. Granted, the ground is here and the bottom of your telescope is here, so that shadow will stretch slightly when it hits the ground. It's not going to be a perfect circle, and you may have to adjust a little bit once you get to the eyepiece, but that's the way to dial it in, and get the sun lined up. They also do sell sun alignment aids. So sun, what am I trying to say here? Solar sight or telescope. Gosh, my brain isn't working right now. What do you call the stinking? They sell these things, and I'm trying to remember what they're called. If somebody help me out in the chat. Like, my brain just left. But you can get a thing that you mount on your telescope. Finder. Solar finder. The finder is the word I'm looking for. Right. These, which what you do is you don't look up the length of it. You look at this from above. Like, your eye is here, right? The sun's behind your head, and you're looking at this and looking for this pinhole of light to get centered on that to tell you that you're looking at the sun. So this is a slightly more advanced option than the shadow technique. But I use the shadow trick. I don't mount one of these, but you can do that. All right. So do you love astronomy? You know I love astronomy, but not now. All right. So Jeff is saying he's got a 900-ish millimeter f7 refractor. I'm trying to think in terms of f7, but what is your aperture? Like 40 millimeter, 60 millimeter, what are we working with aperture-wise? Aperture is going to determine your light gathering capacity. And this will touch on one of my dumb questions that I had on my list, which is people will often ask me, how far can your telescope see, right? And this is almost like the opposite of what the typical theme of tonight is, because this is not a question that people ask me and they feel weird asking me. Then I'm like, it feels like a dumb question. It's more like people will just be like, 130 millimeter, that's a decent scope, man. We can really talk. They'll say, like, this will be the obvious question. This is the question you would think to ask about a telescope. How far can it see? It's a reasonable question that doesn't have a good answer. And that is because the distance is not the problem with the telescope. The problem is size and brightness of the object, right? And a good analogy is if I take a candle, right? Let's say I'm in Orange Park and I put a candle in Fleming Island, you can't see it. But if we light the Osceola State Forest on fire, you will see the glow from Jacksonville, right? So even though Fleming Island is a lot closer to Orange Park than the Osceola State Forest, a forest fire is way brighter than the candle. And that's how it is with aperture and observing. So the question, how far can your telescope see, really depends. There are objects within our own solar system that are tough. Comets are a good example. I've never observed Pluto, but then again, I haven't tried. I could probably if I tried. But it's difficult. You have to basically chart every star in the field and then check a chart and see which star isn't supposed to be there. That's kind of how you get Pluto. But the Andromeda Galaxy is way further away, right? But it's a whole galaxy. It's much brighter. There are more distant galaxies that are edge-on spirals, so you're looking through the whole galaxy, and they're much easier to see. There are closer face-on spirals. You look right through them. They're hard to see. So, unfortunately, the question, how far can your telescope see, is a very reasonable question to ask. It just doesn't have a good answer. And this is why I asked Jeff for his aperture, because the measure really is how faint can your telescope see. What's the faintest objects you can see? What's the magnitude? That's going to depend a lot on the sky, but the aperture is going to help, right? More aperture allows you to amplify a lot of light. So, with that in mind, I'm going to plug his stuff in here because I'm curious to see 130 millimeter refractor. Like, this is what he's working with, man. 130 millimeter, that's a decent scope. And you were saying 900 millimeter focal length, good focal length, f7. That's a nice fast scope. So basically, the higher the f number, the longer your telescope is, and focal length ratio, a high f number, is going to give you a lot of sharpness and clarity on objects. It's going to make it easy to get in there with magnification. So a lot of people in our club, we like to refer to telescopes like this as planet killers. Like, you'll often hear somebody has like a big, fat, really long refractor, and we'll say, man, that's a planet killer right there. Because you can really get in on a planet with magnification. I would say build that thing on Mars and party hard. But also, they're really good for open star clusters and globular star clusters, because where my telescope might show me a blur, yours might make some of these globular clusters. If you don't know, in the audience, they're like millions of stars all packed into a tight ball, and different globulars look different, and some of them you can make out the individual stars, and some of them more sort of a generalized glow. But a lot of focal length, like that telescope, mine's an f5, to give you an idea. I've got more aperture on them. I've got a 10-inch aperture, but it's an f5 scope, so I'm going to be able to see fainter globular clusters. He will be able to pick out the individual stars better than my telescope. So that's a good target for something like that. You said you just got it. What are some good targets this time of year? Cool. So you asked about this time of year, so we're going to pull up Stellarium, and I'm going to give you a few things to get after. But those are really good things. And double stars. And I've got one right out of the gate for you, dude. And this is a challenging one, but your scope can do it. If any scope can do it, yours can. Rigel and Sirius are both binary stars, where the primary is way brighter than the secondary, and they're very, very close. With an f7 scope like you have, that's going to help you split those. All right, what you're going to want to do, and practice on Rigel first. Rigel's a good dry run for trying for Sirius. And for Sirius, what you can sometimes do is put it just at the edge of view, so that when it gets eclipsed, going just out of the edge of view, the secondary will appear, right, if you do it on the right edge. But get Rigel in view and just put the biggest, meanest, scariest eyepiece you can on it, and just crank right on in there, and you'll see the bright star. Yours is a refractor, so you won't get the big spikes, the big diffraction spikes like you get in a obstructed view, like you would get in a Dobsonian. Because normally I tell people, look between the spikes and you'll see it in there somewhere, but yours won't give you the spikes. But you'll see this really bright star, the noise around the star resulting from the atmosphere, the fact that you're really, really zoomed in on it, and then somewhere in that noise and that glow, you'll see a tiny, tiny speck. And your telescope should be really good at picking that out. But I will tell you, this is a challenge object in even a good scope. So that's me giving you a challenge if you want to like rise to the occasion. Other things you can definitely go after with that telescope. It's going to easily get the Orion Nebula. Orion Nebula is not difficult, so this is not a recommendation based on your scope. This is a recommendation based on any scope. Get out there and observe the Orion Nebula. It's cool. You're going to probably have a really good time in Auriga with the... Oh boy, it's spinning everywhere on me. With these open clusters we have in here, M38, M36, M37. Moving over to Gemini, I mentioned that one that was in Gemini. Where did Gemini go, man? I lost my bearings here. There we go. Right side up. Right, moving on over to Gemini, we got M35, right? All excellent targets. The Pleiades is going to look phenomenal. The only thing is, because of your F ratio, you're going to want to put your lowest power, widest eye field eyepiece on the Pleiades, and you may struggle to get the whole thing in the view, right? Because your telescope with that focal length is going to really give you some magnification. Let's see here. That Tau Canis Majoris I talked about is going to look real nice. And like I said, and the planets, what else do we have up here, man? What's this guy? Praesepe. Okay, the Beehive cluster. So if you could find Cancer, it's between Gemini and Leo. Again, similar to the Pleiades. It's going to be hard to keep the whole thing in the field. And so, yeah, any of these open star clusters. And then not as many globs up right now. There's a globular here in Lepus. I just have to find it. I can never find the darn thing. But somewhere here in Lepus, there's a globular cluster that's on the Messier list. I am not finding it. Is it below Lepus? Is that my problem? Yeah, okay. It's right here. M79. There's a good globular cluster target for you. Let's try the Western Sky. We might have better luck over there for like globs and things. Double cluster, again, going to be beautiful. Maybe hard to keep the whole thing in the view, but not as bad as the Beehive and the Pleiades. So those are all some excellent targets for you. M31, man, go for it. You also mentioned, when you asked your question, you said, what are some things I should shoot? Are you doing photography? Is that what you're doing? Because if you're doing photography, then you are not as limited by your aperture as what I'm very used to visual observing, so I'm giving you a lot of targets that are good for like eye to eyepiece with that kind of telescope. If you're doing photography, then your exposures and stacking are going to make up for the difference in aperture. Ooh, got an Amber Alert. If anyone knows where this kid is, man. So, all right, you're doing photography. So in that case, let me give you a couple of really good deep sky photography targets to get you going. These are easy to find. Again, you mentioned this is a new scope, so I don't know if you're new to the photography part as well, but M31, always a classic. There's a bit of a running joke, which is we had a guy come in one time and he was talking about for Astronomy Magazine, and he was the guy whose job was to go through the image submissions and decide what one they were going to publish in that month's magazine. And he used to always joke that he would never publish the Andromeda Galaxy or the Orion Nebula, which you should also definitely photograph, unless you photograph it from the other side. The joke there being that they're two of the most photographed objects in astronomy. But if you're new to astrophotography, there is a very good reason they are so photographed. Go for it. You will not be sad. But also, if you take the same distance from this red star Mirac to Messier 31, you got the same distance the other direction. We have Messier 33, also called the Pinwheel Galaxy. This is a great astrophotography target. And the reason why is because it is the second closest galaxy to us. It takes up a lot of room in the sky, so you get a lot of resolution out of your image, right? In terms of your image, you don't have to zoom in really hard. It's big, it's bright, it's a big, beautiful face-on grand design, as they say, grand design spiral, with all the nice spiral, big blue guy, just dust lanes running through it, just gorgeous, gorgeous galaxy. But I mentioned earlier that these face-on spirals, if you're just doing visual astronomy, if you're just looking, you look right through them, man. The Messier 33 has this weird habit of, like, sometimes we go out and it's like difficult to observe, and sometimes you'll see it with the naked eye, but it really, really responds well to photography. Like taking exposures of this, it loves to be photographed. It's a beautiful galaxy. Another excellent photographic target in the sky. If you wait a little while, if you stay up a little while and let it get higher in the sky, right? I think it's over here off the tail of Ursa Major. Yeah, there it is. The Whirlpool Galaxy. This is one galaxy eating another. Again, the spiral arms in this are very clear, very on display. The dust lanes, the tidal debris coming off. Another really good deep sky astrophotography target for the budding astrophotographer. I highly recommend it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there. You're probably over there furiously taking notes. You've done astrophotography for a few years, but for the most part, it's a 72 millimeter refractor. It's never had the length of this 130 millimeter. Okay, cool. So yeah, and honestly, other people watching the show right now, if you're a club member and you know astrophotography well, hop on in here and give Jeff some tips or pointers. I don't know the photography side that well because I don't do it myself. And one of the things that I was literally saying earlier, the guy who knows everything can't learn. I don't like to be that guy either and pretend like I know everything. So I will admit that I'm not as knowledgeable about the photography side. And of course, also check out our club if you haven't already. I think I'm not sure who this is, but if you're a club member, come into our meetings. You'll meet other astrophotographers and pick their brain. And like I said, man, get in with the community. That's the way to do it. That's the way to learn. So hopefully I've given you some stuff to consider photographing and imaging and visual with that new awesome telescope of yours, man. Good purchase, man. Good job. I'm excited for you. I can't wait to see some of the cool stuff you photograph. All right. I'm not seeing a lot of other activity in the chat at present, but that's cool. You guys might just be sitting there, hanging out, listening to me answer his question. But I do show that we have like 9 or so people according to the analytics. So if you are here and you haven't yet said hello, say hi in the chat. You don't have to have a question or anything. You can just say what's up. But by all means, throw questions in there. You've wanted to shoot Whirlpool? Dude, I want to see it when you do. It's a great target. It's a good visual target too, but it looks really good in photographs. But what I was saying is, yeah, even if it's not a question per se, if you have a topic you're interested in, throw that in the chat. Yes, I have a theme. I'm not super married to it, though. If you guys want to talk about some cool stuff, we'll talk about some cool stuff. But with that, we are an hour into the stream, and I've barely touched on the actual topic, which is pretty typical of me, to be honest. So I've got my list here of supposedly dumb questions that people have asked me, and we're going to talk about them. And some of the stuff may be familiar to some of you guys watching. It may not be, right? And that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea is I want to do this episode so when you watch the show, you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to feel weird about asking my question because we're talking about, this or whatever. So somebody I work with actually asked me this question at work. We're sitting there. He's like, man, he's like, I'm thinking about it the other day, man. And I was like, why do we have seasons? And I was like, man, first of all, I thought it was awesome that he felt that he could just ask that question. Because, again, when we're kids, we know that you can just ask any question, right? Whenever I do this in person and I'm doing my little laser pointer tour, I always say, like, my first rule is only I touch the laser. My second rule is for the adults. It's not for the kids. You don't have to tell them. You have to tell adults that they can ask questions, right? So it was really awesome that he felt comfortable asking the question. And it is a really cool question with a really cool answer. So we're going to dive into why do we have seasons? So let's bring up my visuals here. I'm using Wikimedia Commons for my visuals to just avoid any copyright stuff. Every time I pull up an image, I'm going to try and show you the attribution information and then get into the image. If I'm not doing this right and I use your image and it somehow is not appropriate, please don't come after me with your lawyers, dude. This is not a monetized channel. I don't make any money off of this. I'm just some guy trying to teach people about space. Like, let's all be cool. But let's get into it. So I'm just going to pull up axial tilt, see if I can find a good picture for this. Earth, orbit, seasons. This is a good picture. This shows it decently well. So, first of all, here is the attribution information. Swift, Creative Commons attribution. There we go. All right, so, and this one's in Russian. Okay, well, that's fine. I will translate for you anyway. You know what? Actually, we got the same exact picture in English here somewhere. Do we have it in English? here is this picture in English. Here's the attribution. Talunga, don't know who that is. Creative Commons, 0, public domain. All right, can I blow this one up? Okay, we're going back to the Russian one, guys. It's just gonna be that way because I can make it nice and big. Okay, so here is Das Vidanya with the Russian seasons. If you ever want to learn how to say the seasons in Russian, here you go. So the Earth, as it orbits the sun, it's spinning, but it's not spinning like nice and upright and perpendicular to the orbit. That spin is tilted. So this purple line represents the axis that Earth is spinning about, right? It's spinning about the axis. And you see that everywhere in the orbit, the axis is conserved. It actually does precess a little bit. It does wobble, but it wobbles over the course of like thousands of years. So for the most part, steady. And it's a small wobble anyway. For the most part, it's a steady axis. It goes around. And so during any given time of the year, the Earth might be tilted such that the northern hemisphere is tilted more towards the sun than the southern hemisphere, or the opposite on this side, or sort of halfway in between. When this happens, if, say, the northern hemisphere is angled more towards the sun, that means that the sunlight that is coming and hitting, in this picture, right, Asia, right, the sun that's coming in and hitting Asia is hitting at a steeper angle so that the radiation from the sun, the ultraviolet, and the light can come through and confer the heat that they also deliver, because that's how the sun's heat gets to us. It's in this radiated form, can come in through the atmosphere and heat up the planet more efficiently there. And then the part that's sort of tilted away, when the sunlight hits, like, say, southern Africa here, it rotates around to the side. It's hitting at more of an angle. So some of that light is bouncing off of the atmosphere and not all of it's getting through. So it's not heating it up as much. And so that means that everything south of the equator is feeling that effect and is experiencing winter. And everything north of the equator at that time is being heated up more directly and is experiencing northern hemisphere summer. What else do we know about the seasons? Well, we know that in the summertime the days are longer. Everyone knows that. Well, if we imagine that that the Earth is spinning like this, we can take an imaginary point on the surface and draw the circle all the way around of the path that, say, let's say here in Spain, we pick a spot in Spain from where it goes from dark to light and go all the way around to the dark again. Because the tilt, you're spending more time in the lit up part than, say, if we pick a spot down here, it's going to take a shorter trip before getting back into the dark area. I don't know if you can visualize that well from this picture, but if you have any spherical object at home at all, and you want to like turn off the lights and hit it with a flashlight and draw a dot and turn it at an angle, you'll see that if it's angled toward the light, the dot has further to go through the lit up part. If it's angled away, it doesn't have as far to go. That's why the nights are longer in the winter and the days are longer in the summertime. And then spring and fall, because the angle is not relative to the sun anymore. It's angled, but the sun's hitting it like here. The angle doesn't matter anymore. Basically, the whole Earth turns through the light part at about the same rate, because we're not angled away or angled towards, we're angled to the side. So it doesn't matter. So that's where we get spring and summer, where the days and nights are equal length. And also temperature-wise, we're kind of partway between winter and did I say spring and summer? I'm going to say spring and fall, spring and autumn. They're kind of halfway in terms of temperature as well, right? Either warming up to summer or cooling off to winter when we hit those. And these four locations shown in this picture correlate to what we call the equinoxes and the solstices. So the solstice is the maximum amount of tilt towards or away from the sun before things start to come around and it becomes more sort of an oblique angle. Not sure if I'm using the word oblique correctly in that context. And so your summer solstice is going to be your longest day. We're the most pointed at the sun, basically. And your winter solstice is going to be your longest night and the most pointed away. And then your spring and autumn equinoxes, which the spring equinox has a fancy name. We call it the vernal equinox. And the autumnal equinox, or the spring and fall equinox, is when your day and night's going to be equal length. More or less equal length, depending. If you're far enough north, I think it just is equal no matter where you are, now that I'm thinking about the geometry of it. And then that's your halfway points there. checking the chat just to see what's going on here. Getting into the viewing side of this new telescope, what kind of Barlow's eyepiece and diagonal should I look into? Very new and a little lost, especially when it comes to all that. I'm going to type in the chat real fast. That's an excellent question. I did a whole presentation on buying eyepieces. I'm going to give you what I call the three amigos. These are the three eyepieces your eyepiece case should definitely have. And you can find it out all based on your focal ratios. So you got an f7 telescope. So we're going to multiply that by 2 millimeters. I'm going to do f7. I'm going to multiply that by 1 millimeter. And I messed this up. The first one should be 5. So it's f7 times 5, right? And what these are is exit pupil that you're looking for, right? What's exit pupil? So when you look through the eyepiece, the light comes out of the eyepiece and goes into your eye. Basically, you imagine your eyepiece is going to make a cone out of that light, and there's an optimal point of focus. What's the circle at that optimal point of focus? How big is it? That's your exit pupil. The human retina is arrayed in such a way that different exit pupils are optimal for different reasons. The 5 millimeter exit pupil is optimal because your iris can only expand and produce a pupil between 5 and 7 millimeters. If you're over the age of 25, you're not going to have as much expansion as you did when you were younger. So, but 5 is a good benchmark. Anyone can hit 5. So if you have an eyepiece in the 5 millimeter range, that's your lowest power eyepiece where you're not wasting light, basically spilling across your iris. And we'll actually do the math on this real fast. Let me grab a calculator. All right, so 7 times 5, that's going to be a 35 millimeter. So you're going to want a 35 millimeter eyepiece in your collection. The 1 millimeter eyepiece, the minimum resolution that your retina is capable of is an exit pupil of about 0.5 millimeter. But for comfort and for most situations, you have to have a really, really good sky to get that. 1 millimeter is a good ballpark. 1 millimeter exit pupil is going to get enough of your retina where you'll still be able to build an image. So that's you usually don't want to go much higher power than that unless you're looking at something really bright like the moon. And then the 2 millimeter is like a special sweet spot where it's basically the right size to get the most use out of. So on your retina, you have a densely packed area of cone cells called the fovea. We don't use the fovea for deep sky viewing because it's not as sensitive. The rods around it, there's a ring of rods around it, rod cells that are more sensitive to faint light that you use for deep sky astronomy. And that 2 millimeter exit pupil is big enough to get a lot of use out of the rods, but not bigger than that or smaller. So it's like a nice sweet spot. And you'll often find when you're observing that eyepiece winds up becoming your favorite. It's the one you use all the time. It's in this perfect little sweet spot to get you really good performance out of your telescope. And so for you, of course, that's going to be a 14 millimeter eyepiece. And then your smallest, of course, could be a 7 millimeter. So I recommend getting those three. Get yourself a 35, get yourself a 14, get yourself a 7. And those are more or less a half step away from each other now that I'm looking at it. They're about half and half and half. So, which of course your middle and your last one always are going to be because my numbers are 2 and 1. For Barlow's, what your Barlow is going to do is double or triple the power of an eyepiece. So if you're looking at your eyepiece collection and everything, you got a lot of things that are like double as much or half as much. A times 3 Barlow will fill the gaps between them, right? Otherwise, if your numbers are kind of all over the place, a times 2 Barlow is usually pretty good. Also, if you have a really high focal length telescope, a times 3 Barlow may be kind of overkill on most of your eyepieces. It may be more than you need. But like a really good example here, so you may not have to buy the 14 and the 7 as 2 eyepieces. You might buy the 35 and the 14 and a times 2 Barlow, right? And now your times 2 Barlow gives you, if you put your 35 in it, you got something kind of between it and the 14. And then if you put your 14 in it, that's your 7, right? Because the Barlow just doubles the power. The math on the power of the eyepiece. It's funny. I meant for tonight to be like the simple questions night, and we are just getting into it, man. But that's cool. It's what you want to talk about. So, the formula for the power that you're getting, the magnification, is it is the focal length of your telescope divided by the focal length of the eyepiece. So you said yours is a what is it? It's a 900-ish millimeter. I'm going to do the math based on 900. If the number turns out to be different, you can redo it. But you basically just divide it. So 900 divided by 35. This is why they don't print the magnification on the eyepiece, by the way, because I can take one of my eyepieces in my telescope and then drop it in yours, and it's two different magnifications. So unfortunately, they can't. You have to work it out for your telescope. Gives me 25.7 da 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 da. So we're just going to call that 25.7 or about 26 times is what that low power one is going to give you. And then for the other one, 900 divided by 14. That's going to give you about 64 times. And then the 7 will be twice that, so it's going to be 128 times. So I thought hitting enter would send it. So those are the magnifications you're going to get out of those eyepieces. Right, so excellent question on the eyepieces. And if you already have the 3 Amigos or something close to it, that's cool. You can always take your focal length and multiply by 7 and get your theoretical like minimum mag. And you can always take your 7 and multiply it by 0.5, get like a 3.5 for your theoretical maximum, right? And I gotta tell you, 3.5 millimeter eyepiece, that is Death Star levels of blowing up planets. The reason why, that's why, like, those are like, if you've already got your eyepiece collection and you're ready to expand it a little bit more, you get into that, because you're not going to use them as often as you're going to use these. And when it comes to splurging, if you want to get yourself something nice, like a nice Televue, right, like a Nagler, like something that's going to be like a real nice quality eyepiece, make it the 14, right? Your sweet spot eyepiece is the one to spend your money on. I've got a $300 eyepiece in my collection, and it's an 11 millimeter because for my telescope, 10 is the ideal sweet spot. But I got a good deal on this eyepiece. It's close enough to 10, so I went ahead and did it. I love this eyepiece. Love it so much. Worth every penny I spent on it. I got it for $200, but it retails for $3, and yeah, I love it. So there you go. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit about the eyepieces. And also, did anybody have any questions about the seasons? Probably not. I think a lot of the people in the chat tonight are sort of seasoned astronomy people, but nonetheless, this is a question I was asked recently, bringing it up. And then this actually led our discussion into another question, which is about the moon. And the question I got, I've had a couple people ask me this question and feel dumb, ask you the question. They're like, oh, it's maybe a dumb question, but whatever. And I always just say, no such thing, man. We're here to learn. And the question is, why do I sometimes see the moon during the day, right? Or can you see the moon during the day, right? This is a common thing. And this is because culturally, the moon is a nighttime thing in our culture, right? You look at, and I always interpret this as poetry, but you look at the opening of Genesis and the lesser light and the greater light. This is the lesser light governs the night. We associate the moon with nighttime as a culture, right? You get like, I don't know, man. Kids, bed sheet for their bed or whatever, and the theme is space. It's got the moon on it, right? And black background, because we always think of the moon as a nighttime thing. We don't really think of the moon as a daytime thing. Definitely look into a 14 millimeter Televue, dude. You will not be sad. I'm telling you right now, you will not be sad. So you might be sad when it comes time to pay off the credit card bill, but you won't be sad when you look through it. So the moon is definitely associated with a nighttime thing, but let's think about the orbit of the moon real fast. So I'm going to pull up on Wikipedia. We're going to get moon orbit, right? Earth, moon system here. Actually, I should just do moon's orbit, shouldn't I? Moon's orbit. Can I get a picture? See, now I'm getting like the highfalutin like pictures that are gonna like really show us some stuff, man. But I'm actually not looking for anything too intense on this. So this is a public domain image posted courtesy of. So this is public domain, so I don't have to worry at all. I can't blow this one up either. Oh man. Okay. Do we have a bigger version of it? Can I blow this one up? Okay. This is what we're doing here. And again, it's not in English. Why are they not in English? That's all right though. So this is the Earth orbiting the sun. This is not to scale. This is the moon orbiting the Earth. So if we think about the geometry of it, the moon is going to spend half of its time, right, on the side of the Earth pointed away from the sun. Well, we learned when we were talking about the seasons that the daytime side of the Earth is the side that's lit up by the sun. Night is just what we call it when we roll around to the side facing away from the sun, right? So that would mean that the moon spends half of its time being a part of our night sky, but it spends the other half of its time being a part of the daytime sky, which means that in terms of total time spent, the moon is just as much a daytime object as it's a nighttime object, right? It is up during the day as much as it's up at night, right? It takes an entire month for the moon to go through its whole cycle. So half of the month, the moon is up during the day. So why don't we think of the moon as a daytime thing? It's largely, there's several reasons why, and they're psychological and cultural and visual, right? So for one, we associate the moon with the nighttime because the moon is really on display at night. It's bright, we can see it, it's easier to see. During the day, it kind of fades into the sky a little bit. You kind of look for it to find it. I apologize if you can hear the siren, but man, I hope everyone's all right, dude. If you guys hear some background noise, I don't know how strong this microphone is. But, and again, for those of you who weren't there at the beginning of the stream, this is my new apartment. This is my first stream in the new apartment. So, what was I saying? Yeah, so the moon is not as bright during the day, obviously. But also another reason why we associate the moon with the nighttime is that as the moon goes through its phases, it wanes as it gets into the day, right? It goes away. So a lot of thin crescents and stuff is what we're dealing with during the daytime. It's at night that we get the gibbous and the full moon, which are the big bright ones, right? Those are always going to be on the nighttime side of the Earth, which, think of the geometry of it, of course, if we're seeing it here, it's going to be lit up on the side that we're seeing. If it's over here, it's being lit up from behind on the side that we don't see, right? So that's the other reason why we don't think about it. But you absolutely can spot the moon during the day. Obviously, be careful for the sun, but you can see the moon during the day. And if you look up as often as I do, I often do. I'll be driving on the road, oh, look at the moon, man, you know. And, oh, you know, look at the moon over there or whatever. And I will often see it during the day. And Jane's got a question. I'm going to pin it real fast. There's one more thing I want to mention about daytime moon that's really cool. And why I think more people should consider making a bit of an effort to spot the moon during the day. Because if you see the moon during the day, that means that the moon is on the side of the Earth where the sun is hitting the back of the moon, but the sun is also hitting the face of the Earth. So during the night, we know that a night with a full moon is brighter than a night without a full moon. And that's because the full moon is bouncing sunlight back to the surface of the Earth. The opposite is also true. The not lit up part of the moon can still receive light bouncing off of the surface of the Earth. So during the day, when you see a partial phase of the moon, like you'll see a crescent, and then the non-lit up part, you can sometimes make out craters in the non-illuminated part of the moon. Well, the sun's not lighting those up, not directly. The reason you're seeing them is because the sunlight is bouncing off of the Earth and illuminating that. We call that Earth shine, and it's just really cool to think about. If you see the moon during the day, you can see the crescent, you can see the dark part, it's lit. You can make out some of the details, especially if you have a nice thin crescent. Why can you do that? Well, you're seeing features on the moon from the light being cast onto it by the Earth. That's kind of cool. Something to think about when you're looking at the moon during the day. Jane's got a great question. She says, why is it that when the moon is directly above us... Charlie Mike's here. Welcome, Dad, to the show. Dad, this is my new apartment. This is my board game shelf. You saw it when I had boxes everywhere. I can't wait for you to come see it now, man. But, all right, so start over. Yep, we're starting over. It's now 7:30. Okay, so... Jane's had a great question about the moon. Excuse me. She says, why is it that when the moon is directly above us is not high tide? Why do the tides seem to lag behind the moon? And in reality, you've actually answered the question. They do lag. Let me see if... Yeah, check it out during the day. And this is what I'm talking about, right? supposedly dumb question, we get to something really cool, Earthshine, something we can all learn about, right? So that's why I say no such thing as a dumb question. Every question is an opportunity to learn some cool stuff. So let's talk about the tides, man. The tides are cool. Again, if you don't know, if your hypothetical dumb question tonight would be why are there tides? The tides are caused by the moon, and I'm going to show tidal forces is probably what I want to. Well, okay. So this is what we're going to talk about to explain. This, I think, does a decent job of it. So, Gezeitenwirkung is the name of it. Ooh, this one's in German. I'll actually know what it's saying. This is part of the Creative Commons license. Varen has posted this. Thank you, Varen. Okay, leaving this. I don't want to leave this site, man. I just want to blow this thing up, dude. But here we go. All right. So, as the moon orbits the Earth, its gravity has an effect on the water on the surface. So the water gets pulled up slightly by the moon's gravity and also by the sun's gravity. And what the moon will do is it will create a bulge and a compensating bulge on the other side. And then as the Earth spins through those bulges, that is the tides. But as you can see in this picture, and I'm not 100% on the reasoning behind this. I think it's the Earth's own rotation confers some energy to this bulge and pushes it ahead a little bit further. I'll do more research, and I'll come back to this question on a future episode, actually, because this is a really good question. But it basically puts the bulge, I think, a little bit ahead of the moon in its orbit. And then as we sort of come through it, we see the moon, and then we pass into it. So it seems to lag behind the moon. So this picture shows you that it does in fact lag. In fact, what is really the case is the bulge is slightly ahead of the moon. If I had to make a hypothesis, I'm guessing that this discrepancy, especially because they diagram it out here, I'm guessing this discrepancy is because of this force that they're showing here, which I think is going to be the rotation. Gezeitenbremsmoment. What would that mean in German? Whatever. Anyway, that I'm guessing the Earth's rotation is what causes this to be a slightly... Because you would think the bulge would just point straight at the moon, but it kind of doesn't. And that is a really good question. I'm going to do more research on that. I can't quite answer your question, and I'm not going to pretend to have knowledge I don't, because that's against my principles. But that is a really good question. And hopefully we at least gave ourselves some things to consider, and I'm going to do some more research on that. Let's see, man. Any other questions? Okay, so we don't have any other questions from the chat. Angular momentum. That's a good point. Actually, Dad's got a good point. So we got two hypotheses now, and they may both play a role, too. It could be Earth's rotation is conferring some rotational energy to these bulges, causing them to be slightly ahead of the moon. It could be an angular momentum thing that... maybe like a gyroscopic effect or something is causing them to be a little bit ahead. Once the moon kind of gets it going, it ends up going a little ahead of the moon because of angular momentum. Not really sure. Trying to work out how angular momentum, now that I'm working it out, how that would work, but that's something to consider. Yeah, I want to do more research on this because now you've got me wondering, right? Again, this is the whole point of tonight, right? What causes the tides? It's that thing that supposedly we all know that people feel dumb for asking, but there's actually a lot to learn about it. It's a really interesting question, and you stumped me tonight. You stumped me during the live stream, but that's okay. That's why we're all here, man. Here's a question that I got today, and I think the person who asked it may have been joking or may not have been joking. I don't know. And the reason why, and I don't say that to insult the person at all. It's a good question. The reason why I said they may have been joking is because at work we have like a and it sounds like these all come to me at work. They don't all come to me at work. I just spend a lot of time there, and I know people, and people know that I'm an astronomer, and they ask me stuff. But we have like a group chat for the associates. I'm a specialist on our team, so I work tickets. I don't take the calls directly. It's a call center, for those of you who know. I'm not going to get super into the details, but I work in a call center. I don't take the calls directly. I'm kind of like a supervisor, and we have like a Skype chat where people are like, hey, I got this, unique situation. I'm not sure how to handle it, whatever. And I kind of watch that chat and help with that as well. Okay, cool. So I'm watching that chat today, and my computer did like a sort of hiccupy thing, and there's like a reason why it did. I think I was doing like an update or something, and I lost the chat, and then I got the chat back. So when I came back, I said, "Hey, does anybody have any questions that didn't go answered?" You know, because I lost connection for a bit. And so, tongue in cheek, somebody said, "Why is the Earth round?" Right? This obviously has nothing to do with our job. We work at a bank, but they were just kind of kidding. And I immediately said hydrostatic equilibrium. And somebody in the chat did like the face. They were like, "What?" They did not expect me to just immediately throw the answer in there. But I thought that's a cool question. I'm going to bring it up during the thing tonight. So, why is the Earth and stars and the other planets, why are they round? Right? That's a good question. A lot of debate about the shape of the Earth these days. Not any real debate in the scientific community. We know the shape of the Earth. We've known it forever. But, you know, a lot of people, a lot of debate out there, a lot of people saying different things. Whenever we set up telescopes at our events, sometimes we'll get, every once in a while, you'll get like a guy come up and challenge you on it. It's like, dude, the Earth's not flat, man. Like, we literally couldn't do our hobby if we didn't know the shape of the Earth. Like, I have to account for the Earth's rotation as part of what I do. Jeff in the chat doing astrophotography, when he aligns his telescope, right, the techniques to align it only work on a spherical Earth, right? Because of the motor he uses essentially mimics the Earth's axis, right? He has to align it to the axis of the Earth because the Earth is a spinning ball, right? If it weren't, that would not track the stars correctly on the Earth, right? So just doing our hobby proves the Earth is round to us. But let's talk about why is it round, right? Why is the Earth round? And actually, there's a really famous video from the early days of YouTube where some flat earther was like, "Why is it round?" And this dude just screams, "Gravity!" If you've never seen this video, it's hilarious. It's like, "Gravity! Have you heard of gravity?" But let's actually get into it. So that is the answer. It's gravity. It's hydrostatic equilibrium, and I'm going to see if I can find a cool picture of this. Hydrostatic equilibrium is a very fancy word that just means that anything is going to have anything in space with enough mass will, let's see here, this is Pablo Carlos. Also, by the way, we're getting like, oh, this is a cool, okay, I thought this was palmistry at first, like palm reading. I was like, wrong kind of equilibrium. But no, this is actually kind of neat. All right, so, right, this is Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike by Pablo Budassi. Again, hopefully what I've just said is enough attribution to talk about this. Ooh, we're going to zoom out a little bit on this guy. All right, so what this image is trying to demonstrate is if you have an object in the vacuum of space, sufficient mass, it's big enough, its own weight is going to crush in on itself. And there is no preferred direction in space. There's no up, right? There's just in. So if you imagine 3 dimensions crushing in from every conceivable direction, a sphere just is the natural shape, right? It is the most stable shape for something that is collapsing on itself with no external influences to direct its shape, right? And what the equilibrium part comes in is that the force of gravity crushing inward of this thing wanting to collapse is equalized by the internal pressure of it being solid and it wanting to expand due to heat in the core or whatever. Those two forces will equalize. We call that hydrostatic equilibrium. Hydro because this is fluid dynamics, because it behaves like a fluid because it has plasticity. Even though the Earth, we think of it as solid, is a lot of Earth is semi-solid inside. And so it will naturally conform to a sphere given no other influences. But some of you are saying, and furiously typing in the comments maybe, Earth isn't actually a sphere, right? That's what some people are saying. And I don't mean the flat earthers, but there's people who are going to be like, actually, it's an oblate spheroid. That is true. It is an oblate spheroid, which means the Earth is not perfectly spherical. It bulges slightly. So why is that? Why would the Earth bulge slightly if all the forces of gravitation are equal in all directions? Well, it's because Earth has one more force acting upon it that is not shown in this diagram. And that's because Earth is spinning. So because it is spinning, inertia of the surface near the equator makes it want to keep going, but because it's part of the solid object, it is that inertia in one direction gets, turned because of the rotation of the Earth. Here's a fun fact: centrifugal force is not actually a force; it's just inertia being restricted in a rotational situation. But we could think of it like a force, and so that would create an extra bit of outward force near the equator that doesn't exist anywhere else on the Earth, and so that's why it bulges slightly in the equator. The outward arrow is a little stronger near the equator than it is near the poles because of the rotation of the Earth, which is why the Earth is not a perfect sphere. And in fact, most objects in space are not perfect spheres. The sun also has a slight bulge near the center. Jupiter does. Saturn does, actually somewhat dramatically. In some pictures of Saturn, you can actually kind of notice the bulge that it has, that sort of squishy kind of look. And actually Jupiter, I want to say, in some pictures is noticeably squished because Jupiter spins real fast, by the way. Jupiter sucked up a lot of the angular momentum of the early solar system as it formed, and so it's spinning hecka fast. But there was a comment in the chat as well. Is amateur radio astronomy a thing? Yes, it is. And in fact, we have people in the club. The new membership director, Pearl, she's in the Ham Radio Society. And so she would be a great person to talk to about amateur radio astronomy. There is a radio astronomy program with the Astronomical League that explains how ways you can do radio astronomy and get into it and get a certificate from the Astronomical League for meeting certain goals. There are amateur radio astronomy forums online. There's actually a lot of resources out there, and we have so many ham radio guys in our club. I'm surprised we don't do more amateur radio astronomy. It does kind of depend on what you're doing. There's obviously interferometry would involve having two things that separated and whatever, and may not be as easy for the amateur, but there are amateur radio astronomy options, and I actually think it's really cool, man. If anyone in the club wants to get into it, and they get a setup, I'll come over and hang out and we'll do it, man. I think it's awesome. I'm not gonna set it up, I don't think, because I don't know any of my radios, but I'd love to be invited to come hang out and mess around with some radio astronomy. I think it'd be kind of cool. And of course, Dad says, oh man, you can tell the allergies, dude. I cannot stop itching my nose. Whole car looks yellow, right? Just pollen, dude. It's awful. Dad says, cousin that also, I think it's speech to text, also limit the size of mountains on a planet. That is true, actually. This hydrostatic equilibrium does actually put a limit on how tall mountains can get on the Earth, right? First of all, mountains get eroded away anyway by the wind and so forth. But if a mountain were to get past a certain height, Earth's own gravity would cause it to sink. The plate underneath that mountain would begin to sink, and it would regularize it again. It would bring it back down. There is a maximum height a mountain can get because of the gravitational pull of the Earth would cause the plate to settle, cause the mountain to sink into whatever's underneath it, I guess, would crush it back down and keep it within limits. Looking forward to seeing more of these in the future. Heck yeah, man. Appreciate you sticking around, dude. Let me check my analytics. I'm curious right now how many concurrent viewers. Feels like we've been hanging out about 7 to 9 all night, which is cool. I really didn't promote tonight's special like I should have. I just last minute was like, oh, by the way, I'm doing it, But I'm very glad that people have come in here, man. We've got a half hour left. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat in case we have any other great questions. Loving the interaction in the chat tonight, by the way, guys. Thank you so much. It's it's the welcome back after the couple of months hiatus, and it definitely makes me feel welcome. Makes me want to keep doing this. Let's look at a couple more questions. I'm going to bring up one that I wish people would ask me more often, honestly, and that is, what is the difference between the terms meteor, asteroid, and comet? And I say I wish people would ask me this more often because I feel like in pop culture, they're all space rocks, right? I saw this meme, and it was like, what's a dinosaur's least favorite one of Santa's reindeers or whatever, and it was comet, right? A comet didn't kill the dinosaurs. They weren't killed by a comet. They were killed by an asteroid. There is a difference, right? They weren't killed by a meteor either. So I've heard people say big old meteor killed the dinosaur. No, it's an asteroid, right? There's an actual difference. Let's talk about what the difference is. So part of the difference is location, right? So let's pull up asteroid. Or let's just pull up solar system Let's pull up solar system. One of these solar systems has to have the belts on it. I think. I might be striking out on that one. Gosh, okay, this one's decent, right? Although the scale on this is going to make it difficult. So this is solar system, again, not in English. Here's the information for attribution on the screen now. Please don't sue me. All right. So in the middle, we have the sun. We're going to really, oh boy, we're going to get in on it. We've got the sun in the middle. We've got the first few planets. And then you see this blurry area here? This is the asteroid belt. So what asteroids are is they are basically minor planets. And there's actually was it the Minor Planet Society or something that tracks these guys, right? They are not true planets. But in the history of discovering planets, there were a couple of people kept finding planets between Mars and Jupiter, and then we discovered that they were not big enough to crush themselves into a spherical shape, for the most part. That hydrostatic equilibrium I mentioned earlier is actually one of the definitions of a planet, right? By the IAU, the current definition of a planet has 3 parts, and one of those parts is it has to be big enough to be crushed into a sphere, which means that Pluto actually meets the size requirement. That's not why Pluto's not a planet, but we'll touch on that in a second. But these objects, they kept finding these things. A lot of them were just sort of, small potato-ish kind of things. Some of them were the size of a car. Some of them were like the size of Texas. Some of them were the size of our moon, right, or getting up there. Some of them were spherical. Like one of them is indicated on the chart here. Ceres is indicated. And so a catch-all term for all of these things was coined. It was called asteroid. Asteroid just means star-like. And actually, I have in my collection, and this is a cherished thing, I might have to break it out, but it's put away. I have to find it. One of our club members, he passed away, and he had a really excellent collection of astronomy books. A lot of people in the club know that I speak German, and so and so they, of course, scoured for any German books, and they found one, and it was a book in German, and somebody had written in the inside, like, cover of the book, first usage of the word asteroid. So this, and I don't think I have a first printing of it or anything. This isn't like a historical artifact, but this book apparently is the first time the word asteroid appears in print. And it's in German, so it's conjugated asteroiden. But that's kind of cool if true. I'll have to look up if it really is the case. And it's underlined in the book. It's actually kind of, so I keep that somewhere. But asteroid, aster means star. It means star-like because it looks like a star on the photographic plate. So that's what an asteroid is. Asteroids come from the asteroid belt, and they are fairly big for the most part, right? A meteor is a very small piece of rock or dust or debris that hits the Earth's atmosphere. And in fact, there are 3 terms for that. When they're out in space, it's called a meteoroid. And meteors tend to be like you could hold one in your hand. They don't tend to be super, super big. It's a meteoroid in space. When it comes into the Earth's atmosphere and creates that streak of light, that's what we call the meteor. Meteor is actually the term for, like, you see that phenomenon, and the object itself is a meteor when it's doing that, and then when it hits the Earth's surface, it becomes a meteorite. The meteorite is the thing you can pick up later, right, and look at and sell it on the internet or whatever. And I have a meteorite as well. But that's what a meteor is, a meteoroid, meteorite. They're smaller. They come in storms and showers. So you can see meteor showers, right? So that's what that is. And then a comet, if I zoom out, or if I just venture out here, this second blurry ring that you're seeing here in the picture, right? This guy out here, that is the Kuiper belt. And that is a big belt of cometary material. And what makes comets special, so asteroids and meteors tend to be made of rocks and metal. Comets are made of rocks and ice. Right? Comets are stony, and they're dirty, and they're icy. They're like dirty snowballs. And not just water ice, but there's definitely a lot of water ice in comets, but you get things like frozen ammonia, frozen carbon dioxide, frozen nitrogen. These kind of things form the ice of a comet. And they orbit out here in the Kuiper belt, and then there's a big cloud of comets much further out called the Oort cloud. And when a comet when its orbit gets adjusted so that it brings it close to the sun. Man, these allergies. I'm about to sneeze. When the comet's orbit, it will come in, get close to the sun, and then whip back out again. When they get close to the sun will turn that ice into steam. It actually skips melting entirely. We call that sublimation. Just goes straight from a solid to just steam. And then the sun's radiation pressure blows that steam behind it, and that creates a cometary tail. Although I learned recently, the big bright white tail you see around a comet, that's not the steam. The steam is the blue one, the harder to see one, what we call the ion tail, because it gets ionized and it follows the magnetic field lines of the sun. The bright white one is actually the dust. That's all the dirt coming off of the comet, basically. And the sun's light reflecting off of all that dust creates the white tail. So that's what a comet is. So it's, again, it's different from an asteroid, it's different from a meteor. Comets, especially, I feel like, are something that everyone knows what a comet is until you ask them what a comet is, right? It's a very commonly known, commonly misunderstood space rock. But that's what a comet is. There have been comets that have hit the Earth, and they don't do like the asteroid that hit the Earth and took out the dinosaurs, caused the Chicxulub crater. It left a giant crater, which today is mostly under the sea, but like radar imaging from space has revealed where it is. It hit near Mexico. The comets will have a tendency when they come into the atmosphere, because they are not as solid of an object as a meteor or an asteroid would be. Think about it. They're mainly held together by ice. The heat of reentry is going to weaken that real quick, and they tend to just sort of catastrophically fall apart on their way into the atmosphere. And so you'll get where the comet will come in and then just boom, and it'll just detonate, right? There was an event, I always get, is Tunguska is what it is, because Tuskegee is a different thing entirely. But Tunguska, the Tunguska event in Russia, they think might have been a comet that came into the atmosphere and detonated and flattened trees for a mile, didn't leave a crater, didn't leave a meteorite behind that you can go find and pick up, right? So probably a comet, right? So that's the difference between those kind of things. So since we're talking about comets, let's go ahead and talk about the green comet a little bit. I forgot to look up why comets are green. I meant to do that. I'll have to research that before our next thing. I did want to talk about the green comet. The green comet, I will say, is a bit of a case of they're toasted, right? If you've ever seen Mad Men, there's the Philip Morris scene where the guy's like, we got to advertise cigarettes, and all these studies come out. And he's like, tell me about the process. It's like, well, we pick the tobacco, we toast it. He goes, cool, Philip Morris, they're toasted. And the guy's like, yeah, but all tobacco is toasted. He's like, no, their tobacco causes cancer. Yours is toasted, right? And that's the famous scene from Mad Men where they come up with the slogan. But the point being that it's true, but it's trivially true, right? It's not like, yes, they're toasted, but that's everybody's are toasted, right? So the same thing happens sometimes with the news hyping up these things. So this comet is green, and they're like, hey, oh man, somebody in the news figured out this thing was going to be green, and that's all the news headlines, the green comet, the green comet. So many comets are green, guys. Like, it is not rare for a comet to be green. Like, I will show you real fast. So yes, it is true this comet is green, or I guess it's green. I haven't seen any recent. This is not the thing I'm looking for. Tell you what I'm going to do here. Astronomical League. I might have misspelled it. Does the website, it is like Aerith something or whatever, but the easiest way I know to get to it is to look at the observing programs, A through C, Comet program, and there are resources down here. Yeah, I was right, aerith.net. Okay, I just need to be careful. So here is like this website. This guy tracks like every comet. It's incredible. And you can see this is the green comet they're making a big deal about. This is the path it's taking. You can see when it's going to come up. But if we look at this. Pan-STARRS. That's kind of greenish. Hey, look at this one right here. This other comet, Pan-STARRS. That one's kind of greenish. Here's a greenish one. That one's kind of got a green tint to it. That one's a little bit green. Green is not a rare color for comets, right? And there's a green one. So this one, for whatever reason, the news is hyping it up as the green comet, but that's actually not unique among comets, right? Oh, you know what I think is because Eris, the Final Fantasy character. Okay, so green is not an uncommon comic color by any stretch of the imagination. Um, Let me see. Do we have time to get into? Man, I've actually covered all the ones I had written down. I thought I had a longer list than this. Here's what I'm gonna do, man. We got 15 minutes left. My phone just buzzed. Is somebody trying to text me a question? Let's see. No, that's my Grubhub order. That's right. I ordered food to arrive when the stream was over. I'm being lazy tonight. I try not to Grubhub too much. It's expensive, man. It's hard out here. But oh, and so I posted this stream in the Visual Astronomy group on Facebook, and the admin had to approve it. They just approved it. So if you're here from Visual Astronomy, welcome to the end of the stream. So okay. So what was I got derailed. Right, last 15 minutes of the show. I'm gonna do another quick plug for the Astronomy Club, and then I'll fill the rest of the time talking about whatever, man. By all means, feel free to sneak a question in on me here at the end, because I kind of don't really have much left to talk about. I got one thing, but it may take longer than 15 minutes. So, but let me go ahead and bring up the NEFAS website again real fast for you guys. Okay, so what the heck? There must be a death metal band called NEFAS. I'm going to look into that. All right, so here is the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society. We are the Astronomy Club here in Jacksonville. If you live in the Jacksonville area, if you've been hanging out with us in the chat and you're not yet a club member, I highly encourage you to go to membership, join NEFAS. We are the Astronomy Club here in Jacksonville. Ooh, let's take a look at our picture of the day. Or this isn't this is the picture of the day. Hydra cluster of galaxies. Wow, very cool. Look at all those, man. Oh, somebody asked me earlier today, what's the furthest galaxy anyone's ever discovered? I'll tell you what, let's Google it, man. What's the furthest galaxy ever discovered? Sorry, I immediately got derailed there. Farthest galaxy ever discovered is GNZ11, and it is, wow. Look at that block. Look how low the resolution is, man. It is way in the background of that picture. Well, there you go. Person at work that wanted to know. I think it was Catherine. GNZ11. I'm going to have to send that to myself so I can answer that question later. Okay, so this is the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society. Definitely check out our membership. Consider joining if you are interested in the club. Especially if you are an astronomer and you've got equipment and you want to learn more about using your equipment, there is no better thing to do than to get into a club. Join a club. You won't regret it. If you want to really pursue astronomy. Our memberships, student and senior, start at $20. That is, do you have a student ID or are you more than 55? If you're in college or in high school, you're a student. And by the way, these are yearly memberships. I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream, by the way, but I'm going to reiterate because that's how people join. I often say during the stream, I'm the membership director for the Northeast Florida, I no longer am. I stepped down. Pearl is our new membership director, but it was an honor being the membership director for so long. But it was never meant to be a permanent thing. And I felt it was time for me to hand over the reins. And I was starting to get burned out, if I'm being honest, and I didn't want that to happen because I don't want to get burned out on astronomy. I love astronomy, right? And that's no knock against anything. It's a volunteer job I did for a few years, and it was time. That's all it was. But anyway, students and seniors, $20. Individual, $40 if you're just some guy. Family is $50, and family we define as any two adults and whoever they happen to be in charge of, right? We do not get nitpicky about what a family consists of. There's a family in our club that's just two people that are dating, but they've been dating for a really long time. I feel like marriage is just inevitable for them, but that's not my place to say. But there's a very, very long-term couple, and they're like, we want to do a family membership, and we're like, yeah, go for it, man. There's same-sex couples, opposite-sex couples, whatever. You're a family, and you're part of our family, right? We want you to come learn with us. So we don't get specific on the definition of a family. It's any two adults, and if you are in charge of anybody, they're in your family, right? So And then the benefactor is just the same as individual, but you just want to give more. If for some reason you just want to give more, you just really believe in what we're doing, you can be a benefactor. But I always tell people you don't get anything special other than you're mentioned in our newsletter. We mention who our benefactors are. And sometimes if we're doing like door prizes, right, and we do like a raffle, okay, benefactors may get like a second ticket, right? Every once in a while you'll get like a little thing like that, but there's no like big perks program or anything for our benefactors. It's like you're not missing out on the benefactor stuff if you just do student or individual, but it's just there if you want to give, right? If you just want to do more, if you just really believe in what we do and you have the ability to, you can. And you could just join right here on the website and pay through PayPal. And then, yeah, with the last 10 minutes, I'm just going to quickly reiterate some of the stuff from our calendar. Day after tomorrow is the Dark Sky Observing session. I got to see if I'm going to be able to make it to that. I'd like to, though. It's a very strong tentative yes. Basically what I need to do is get an oil change that day, and then that's going to determine. But I'd like to go do that. Hannah Park next Saturday, not this Saturday. I thought it was this Saturday. I'm going to have to correct. I told a bunch of people this Saturday. I'm going to correct them. Next Saturday is Hannah Park. Definitely want to take a second and talk about Hannah Park. If you've never been, if you're late to the stream and you don't know about our club and you don't know about Hannah Park, man, come out to Hannah Park. I do a laser light show tour of the sky. We fill the park with telescopes. They're not there for us. They are there for you guys. Those telescopes are for you to look through them, to ask questions, to learn about our magnificent universe. Earlier in the stream, we talked about things that are in the sky right now. That's the kind of stuff we're going to be looking at Hannah Park. We're going to look at Mars. We're going to look at the moon. We may not see Jupiter. I don't know. We might lose Jupiter by then. We might see it at the beginning of the night, right? We're going to look at the Andromeda Galaxy that I was talking about. We're going to look at the double cluster. We're going to look at these things. And I will say the park charges $5 a person. We do not charge anything. So when I say that this is free, it's only free in that we're not charging anything, but the park will charge. Actually, I think it's $5 per car. So I want to say if you all load into one car, you can get into the park for $5. And you have to be in before they close the gate. That's why we have 5 o'clock written on here. The time changes with the seasons. No later than 5:30 p.m. They will close the gate. Once the gate is closed, you can leave at any time, but you can't come back in, right? And we kind of hang out and wait for it to get dark. It's not our fault. They tell us we have to be in by then, so it's going to be daylight when you get there. But then once it's dark, man, then we're partying. This is not weather dependent. So if the weather's bad, we're still there, man. We will show up no matter what. We will hang out under the awning in the rain talking about space. We will do it. We're not scared. Nevis never cancels. But you feel free to not show up if the weather's bad. That's your prerogative. But we always do show up. And if you've got a new telescope or whatever, you want to pick our brains about how to use it, come a little early. That's the best way to do it. It's the best way to learn your telescope is to come a little bit early. And talk to us about our scopes. I'm seeing a question in the chat. Was thinking somebody in the club said LED streetlights were worse for light pollution. I thought it was how bright the light was, not the type that mattered. You know what? That's a really cool question. I'm going to pin it for one quick second. I'm just going to very quickly go through the rest of the counter stuff, but I do want to hop on that question, and we'll probably talk about that the rest of the night. So moving right along, after the Hannah Park Stargaze, moving into March, we got the Jacksonville Science Festival that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in March, and our general meeting. Stargazing and S'mores is a private event. It's not open to the general public, but if you're a club member and you want to volunteer, check it out. If you're not a club member, sorry, this one is a special gig. If you are a member of the Friends of Little Talbot Island, though, then you can go. That's who it's for. They're a nonprofit that does like a nature preserve out there on Little Talbot Island, and we come out and use the telescopes and talk a little bit about light pollution because that's a topic dear to their heart because they have the sea turtles, right? And the wildlife out there, and it's great sky, and we have a good time. And then on the 16th, we're going to have my next live stream. So let's talk about the LED lights. Why are LED lights worse for light pollution? Well, for one, you thought it was about how bright it is the main thing. The LED lights are bright. That is actually a big part of it. The LED street lights are way brighter than the old halogen bulbs that they used to use. The other thing is, you probably noticed that street lights used to be sort of orange, right? You get that sort of orange halogen light kind of thing. So for one, it's not blue, and you might have heard about blue light. You sometimes will hear about blue light messes up our circadian rhythm. Light pollution isn't just about observing. When we talk about light pollution, we're also concerned about the effect that it has on wildlife, on animals, and we are animals. And it messes up our circadian rhythm to see blue light all the time. And so the new LED lights, they get the whole darn spectrum. It's not as good for our circadian rhythm as that soft glow of the orange light. But also, they are worse for light pollution by virtue of being LEDs, and it's not just because they're brighter. And that's because, again, the full spectrum. So there are filters you can get for your telescope that help with light pollution. They're not perfect, but they help. And a good example is a ultra high contrast filter, which will basically cut out a lot of the visible spectrum, but will allow through light associated with certain wavelengths that are associated with ionized oxygen and ionized hydrogen will be able to get through the filter, but the rest of the spectrum doesn't. These filters are more useful on nebulae because galaxies are broad spectrum emitters and stars are broad spectrum emitters, so the filter filters them out. It doesn't actually help, but nebulae will radiate mostly in these bands, and so you can kind of filter for them. Well, the problem is those work really well for halogen bulbs because halogens would burn in the parts of the spectrum we didn't want. They don't work so well for the LEDs. LEDs are broad spectrum emitters, which means that light pollution that goes up there and bounces back, the filter will still help because the light from the LEDs is the whole spectrum, so cutting any of it out is helping. But there is some LED light in the part of the spectrum that we are filtering for, so you're going to get that light pollution even with the filter on. It's going to affect it. So the LEDs are putting out broad spectrum light pollution, and it's worse. It's worse because of the color. It's worse for wildlife. It's they're just plain brighter than the orange guys used to be, and they're harder to filter out with light pollution reduction filters. And the bluer end of the spectrum is more energetic than the red end of the spectrum, so it scatters more easily and travels further. So even at the same brightness, that LED bulb is going to go further than the halogen bulb would because red light just lacks the energy. This is why the sky is blue. The blue, well, kind of. No, actually, this Rayleigh scatter is a different thing. Never mind. Scratch that. But the blue light is going to be a problem. And Rayleigh scattering, now that I'm on the topic, blue light's going to Rayleigh scatter across the sky as well and travel further for that reason too. And so the LEDs putting out the whole spectrum, especially and including the blue, makes them worse than the orange halogen old-fashioned incandescent street lamps used to be. So that's and they are just plain brighter. They are monstrously bright. So all of that combined is why they're worse. And with that, I've got 2 minutes left in the stream. You see me, I'm looking over because now we're getting to the point where it's like the end of the stream. My food might be here, honestly. It is here. Cool. I'm going to go grab it in a second. I don't know anything I can talk about for 2 minutes, so we'll just go ahead and call it here, especially because I want to grab my food. Thank you guys so much for joining the stream and hanging out and talking space, man. If y'all didn't show up, obviously I wouldn't do this, obviously. But it really does mean a lot to me that people care and they tune in and they get something out of this live stream, and it's just not just an ego trip for me. So thank you guys so much, and I look forward to seeing you next month. I'll have to think about what the topic's going to be. I've decided, by the way, because I used to just do completely freeform, and I feel like when I have themes, those go better. Although tonight, there was no shortage of questions. So tonight would have been a good one, even if I didn't have a theme. But I'll figure out what the theme is going to be. I will see you guys next month. Until then, keep looking up, and have a wonderful night.